Trevor Zegras, Jake Guentzel, or Martin Necas? Who would be the best fit for the Nashville Predators?
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Predators podcast, and thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are your free daily Nashville Predators podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to kick off this Thursday episode with a shout out to our Locked On Pred heads. Those are our everyday listeners who tune in each and every weekday to talk about Nashville Predators hockey with us. We appreciate your support, and we love that we get to spend just a little bit of your day with you. I'm Ann Kimmel. I am a writer at Penalty Box Radio, and friends, I have a partner in crime.
Yes, you do. I'm Emma Lingen, and I am the Predators site editor and reporter for the Hockey News.
On today's show, Emma and I are turning the page. We've been looking back at the 2023-24 performances of the Nashville Predators players, but it is time, friends, to look ahead. Today, we are going to take a look at 3 offensive players that the Predators could potentially target this offseason, and we're going to tell you the upsides and the downsides to each of those 3 moves. But before we dive into all of that, I want to let you know today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. All right, Emma. So we've wrapped up the past. We're looking ahead, and it's an interesting place for the Nashville Predators because it's clear that there's more work to be done when it comes to this roster. Nashville has some cash to spend. What do you think they need to be looking for specifically? And let's focus mostly on offense right now, like offensive players. What do they need to find?
They need a legitimate 1C and or 2C with the potential to become a 1C because, look, Ryan O'Reilly, fantastic, but not getting any younger. And right. Then you've got, Colton Sissons was your second line center. Fantastic player, brings a lot to the table, but he's not a second line center. He is a third line center, or should be, but he's been forced into this second line role. Got Tommy Novak and Cody Glass, who are both kind of, question marks in terms of will they stay at center or will they be moved to the wing? So I think if we're strictly talking about offense, I think they need some things on defense too, including, offense from the blue line, I think is something that they could get.
Absolutely.
But yes, I think in terms, you need to score more goals. It's really not that hard. Barry Trotz said it, and that's what they need. They need more goal scoring.
Right. You talk about Ryan O'Reilly is not getting any younger. Let's talk about a younger option that the Nashville Predators could potentially, have a little chat about. And let's talk about Trevor Zegras, of course, with the Anaheim Ducks. He is a young sprout, my friends, 23 years old, only played 31 games last season, 6 goals, 15 points. He is on a deal right now, $5.75 million through 2025-26. This was a rough season for Zegras, a lot of injury. And of course, that was something that the Nashville Predators fans saw firsthand because ended up breaking his ankle at Bridgestone Arena. And that was rough. It was a rough look, but he also had an injury earlier in the season. So again, we're looking at last season, 31 games played. When you hear people kind of throw out the name Trevor Zegras with the Nashville Predators, what's your initial reaction, Emma?
My initial reaction is he certainly, on paper, he fits the bill of what they need. That he's a young center that could potentially benefit from a change of scenery and is going to, put up points. Like you said, last year was a bit of an outlier. And he's still got a very young career. He's only got 4 NHL seasons, really. But really only 2 full NHL seasons. Now, in those 2 seasons, he put up 61 and 65 points. So, okay,
That's not nothing.
yeah, I'm intrigued by that. And so, normally if I want to see a pattern, right? I don't want to just see like, oh my God, he had 160-point season, give him a contract for the rest of his life. Like, I like to see a pattern there. And he's shown somewhat of a pattern. But I also I wonder, I'm like, he's young. Is he going to be coachable? Like, I don't know. And I think that, again, he is not a free agent. So
Right.
you would have to trade for him. So it would, and Anaheim has certainly got to know how valuable he is on the market, and they might be asking teams to overpay. I'm sure there would be teams that will overpay. And so it just, to me, if you could get him at the right price, then I think he would be a good fit, like on the ice for this Predators team. But I don't know how realistic it is.
I agree with you. I think when you look at a deal like this, what's it going to cost Nashville? And Nashville is trying to bring pieces in, and there's not as much fat right now to move around with the Nashville Predators on the roster. They've got some young players coming up through, but you don't really want to trade some potential prospects with where the Predators are. It's going to be a big asking price to get Trevor Zegras, and I'm not sure that Nashville's going to want to pay that. I do think he's interesting to think about. Of course, very creative playmaker, not afraid to try things. And it's funny, when Barry Trotz took over, one of the things he talked about during this reset is he wants it to be exciting hockey. He wants it to be entertaining. Well, friends, I don't think it gets much more entertaining than Trevor Zegras on ice. I mean, this is a kid who he's just not afraid to try anything offensively. Very like kind of just a unique personality in the hockey sphere for sure. And like you said, he's young. He hasn't had a ton of NHL experience, but you're talking about somebody who put up 20 goals in his 2 full seasons. Wow. So this is somebody that could score some goals for Nashville. So there is a lot about this idea that is intriguing. The price for me is a concern. And you look at, 5.75 million, that's his, AAV. Nashville only pays 2 players more than that right now. Philip Forsberg and Roman Josi. Are you 100% sure that you are going to get what you want for that price at this point, to bring him on board? So for me, I know he's worth it to a lot of teams. I'm not 100% sure he would be worth it to Nashville.
I don't know. There's also, you got to look at where Anaheim is too. Like Zegras is a natural center. Like he was, the top center in their system, and then has since come up and performed well at the NHL level. It looked like after that, though, Anaheim was devoting a lot of their high draft picks to centers. So it's like, is the plan for Zegras to move to the wing? Is this a contingency plan that they're planning to get rid of him? Like, I really don't know. And so I think that there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot that we don't know about. It's not just a one-sided thing. Like, oh, here's what Nashville needs. It's also like, oh no, here's what Anaheim is trying to accomplish. And I really don't know the answer to that right now. So I think that plus another thing about Zegras that kind of, I don't know that it's escalated to the point of being a legitimate concern, but it's not a trend that I love, is he takes a lot of penalties, and he kind of lets his emotions get the best of him sometimes, which, he's a young guy and he's very competitive and very passionate, and, you don't fault him for any of that, but he lacks a little bit of the discipline that I think that Andrew Brunette and Barry Trotz are going to demand from a player on their team. Again, not saying that can't be coached out of him.
Right.
But I don't know how coachable he is. I feel like he needs to be, we were talking about this before we started recording. I feel like he needs to be humbled. Now, I think I think Andrew Brunette could be a guy to do it.
If
but
there was ever a coach not named John Tortorella.
Yeah, like he, listen, his ceiling sky high,
Mhm.
but you have to put in the work. And I'm not saying he's not, but I think that Andrew Brunette is very specific, very particular about what he's looking for from his players, and you've got to rise to the occasion and do exactly what he's looking for, to be successful. And again, I don't know. I think this is a guy that, again, on the ice fits perfectly with this team,
Mhm.
I think. But there are just a couple like question marks around him that I'm not completely all in on him.
Yeah. There aren't maybe necessarily bright red flags, but there are some pink ones, I
Yeah.
think for sure. And I'm kind of along with you in that coachability thing because remember, one of the things that Andrew Brunette has been very uh, vocal about, especially with regards to like Phil Tomasino, is you can have all the talent in the world. But you have to do what I need you to do. You have to do more than the things that are flashy that you're good at. And you have to bring in a player with that. The other thing, and you and I talked about this real briefly before too, is Nashville and Barry Trotz especially is very protective, I think, of the locker room vibe. And certainly not implying in any way that Trevor Zegras would be some sort of locker room cancer or anything like that. But he is a very different personality. And I think whoever Barry Trotz looks at, there is a factor for him of what is this player going to be like in the locker room with this team? What is this, personality going to do to the dynamics of the team? And I don't know where Barry Trotz would fall with somebody like Trevor Zegras. There's a risk there when you have somebody who is high flash and coming, big personality coming into the locker room. So I agree with you. There are some things on paper that make this look like Nashville needs to pursue it. But what is the cost and what are the dynamics too? So Zegras, yeah, this is one to keep an eye on. Coming up, we're going to talk about another player who could go from Nashville zero to hero if he joined the Predators. Can Nashville Predators fans overlook the 2017 Cup Finals and embrace Jake Guentzel? First, today's episode is brought to you by our great friends at Game Time. If you are looking to attend some fun summer events and you want to avoid all those ticketing hassles, you need to check out Game Time. Game Time is the fastest and easiest way to get tickets to your favorite sporting events, concerts, theater, and more. The Game Time app takes all the guesswork out of buying tickets. They show you your all-in price upfront, so you are not surprised by excess fees at checkout. And you can even get a view from your seat to know exactly what you're buying. Right now, Game Time has great deals on the Savannah Bananas, the musical Hairspray, Emma's favorite Lil Wayne, and Alanis Morissette. And with Game Time's lowest price guarantee, if you find a ticket in your section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So, coming up on tomorrow's show, we are going to have a fun Friday episode. Emma and I have been super excited about this episode all week long, and we put it off till Friday. We're going to talk about some of those NHL combine questions and tell you what we would want to ask some of these young players. But we are still focused on ice right now. We're talking about some offensive players that Nashville could potentially be interested in. We've talked about Trevor Zegras. Let's talk about Jake Guentzel. So, first question, Emma, can Predators fans get over the fact that he was a part of the Penguins Cup run in 2017? We are a bitter lot, my friend.
Look, as someone, and I say this in the most respectful way that I can, Predators fans need to let 2017 go.
On
let
a
it
number
go.
of levels.
Let it go on a number of levels. Like, it's one of those, smile because it happened and keep that as a memory, as a core memory. And some, like, look, if you're a Predators fan and you remember that cup run, I mean, of course, that was the best time to be a Predators fan. I'm not saying, oh, it didn't count, it didn't matter, like, forget about it. Don't forget about it. Keep it as a treasured memory. But it is 2024. We need to stop trying to recreate 2017 and stop holding these grudges. Like, again, if you can get a guy of Jake Guentzel's caliber, a player of his caliber on your team, yeah, you throw that grudge in the trash. Like, I don't care who you are. You absolutely get him. Now, do I think it's likely that the Predators get him? No, because he's 29 years old.
Right.
At this point, he's going to be a free agent, and he is going to be seeking the payday of his life right now,
Right.
as he should, because he he was going through a lot with Pittsburgh, and everyone was saying, oh, but he's only good because he's playing with Sidney Crosby, and then he gets traded to Carolina and just blew everyone's socks off, saying, like, okay, maybe it's not just Sidney Crosby that was making him
Right.
good. But I think because of that, I think that he is exactly the kind of guy that teams would overpay for. Barry Trotz has made it clear he's not going to overpay for anybody, especially a guy that's likely seeking the kind of big contract that he is. And so, I could see him signing, because he was making $6 million on his last contract. I mean, he's gonna be making at least 7, but
Right.
likely more than that on the free agent market. And there are teams out there who will pay him that. And probably teams that are looking at contending for a Stanley Cup like this year, which the Predators are still probably a few years away from that. And that's fine, but you don't want another Ryan Johansson, Kyle Turris, Matt Duchene situation
Right.
on your hands. And Barry Trotz has made it pretty clear he's not interested in doing that. So I think he's a guy that Guentzel's a guy that you kick the tires and you see, like, you check in and see what his asking price is, because it would be kind of irresponsible not to, when you're the Predators and you have a player of this caliber on the market. He fits a lot of your needs. He good, like, volume goal scorer. He's fast, and he has a lot of playoff experience, and those are all good things. But I mean, knowing that there are going to be teams out there that are going to pay him, I would venture to guess somewhere in the $7.5 million ballpark. To me, that's a non-starter.
Yeah, especially at 29 years old. And I agree with you. This is going to be this is going to be his big fat long-term juicy contract. And it should be like, that's what he should go ahead and get. But if Nashville is going to pay a big juicy long-term contract, you want to do it to somebody who's not about to turn 30. And
Easy
I
there.
oh, hey, like, I could be his mom. No judgment. I'm talking in hockey years.
Uh-huh.
Hockey years. But he is, I think it was great what, like you mentioned, what we saw him do in Carolina, because the narrative around him has been, he's good because of Sidney Crosby. Well, friends, Carolina got a lot of bang for their buck with that move to get him there. But I agree with you. You're looking at somebody who is going to try to get $7.5 million. And that number should probably make Predators fans feel a little bit twitchy because of Duchene, Johansson, like, and the age. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, I think, not that he is not a veteran with a lot of good years left, and not that I wouldn't love to see him with some of the younger players that Nashville is bringing up. I think there'd be some really interesting upside, but it all comes down to, is it worth it long term? Is this the long-term investment that's going to get the Nashville Predators through a reset and back to cup contention in a time frame where it's not money wasted. And this is tough. I think it might be a little bit too late in the game to make this a smart move.
Yeah. Or I think that if the Predators were closer to their, their cup window, like if
Right.
they could contend this year, then I say, yeah, make a run at him, because he could be very impactful and a big, difference maker on your team. With the Predators kind of where they are right now, it's just, to me, that would be an overpay for something that's not going to be as valuable when you need them to be.
Right. And I think 2 years from now, you have a better idea of what you have in Evangelista, in Novak, in Joachim Kamel, in Fedor Svechkov, in some of these younger players, Zachary Leroux, where you would have a better idea of how close you really are. It's still a little bit of a guessing game, really. How close are the Predators to that cup window again? There's still enough question about it that you might not want to drop a chunk of change on somebody that's a little bit older for a long-term contract. Here is the other problem with Jake Guentzel. Friends, we already have a number 59 on this team. Like, there is one number 59.
Why didn't we start with that? That's the biggest problem.
Non-starter friend. Like, you
Yeah.
can't, you're going to have to know your place, Jake.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to pick like something that's not 59. But he is such an interesting player. And this is somebody who I know Carolina in theory would love to keep, but boy, Carolina's got a lot. They're going to have to do a lot of financial dancing to figure out what they're going to end up with on their roster for next season. This is a player I think it's going to be very interesting to keep your eye on. And I agree with you. Kick the tires on it, Barry Trotz, and just see. But I think there's going to be so much interest in him. It just may drive up the price to where it's not going to be a great deal for the Nashville Predators. Interesting player. Might be like right player, wrong time.
Yeah.
Wrong price.
Yeah.
Well, coming up, we do have one other player from Carolina that I feel like we really have to talk about. He's generating a ton of conversation in Nashville. Should the Predators go all in on Martin Necas? We're going to talk about that. All right, Locked On Predators fans, we are sitting here debating what GM Barry Trotz would do, but I want to take a minute to bring up one of our partners, the mobile game Ultimate Hockey GM. If you have ever dreamed of being an NHL GM and managing your own hockey franchise, if you think you could run the Predators better than Barry Trotz, well, friends, your dream can come true, and this game is most definitely for you. You can manage every strategic aspect of your team, play through the seasons, and lead it to glory. Hire the right coaches and staff, trade players or draft picks, and navigate through free agency and the draft, all in a challenging and realistic game world. As a Preds fan, you know there is no offseason. GMs are constantly making moves at every point of the year to improve their team's chances, and that's why I think you are going to love this game. Ultimate Hockey GM is completely free and playable offline. You can play on the go as you want and when you want to. By the way, Locked On Network listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On NHL in the game store. So make sure to check it out. To download the game, just visit hockeygm.app or look it up on the App Store. Ultimate Hockey GM, start your dynasty today. All right, Emma, now we're going to get to the juicy player, the one that I think a lot of people in Nashville are intrigued by for a number of reasons, and that is Carolina's Martin Necas. 77 games played this past season, 24 goals, 53 points. He is a RFA. Here's what is interesting to me. He's just a little 25 years old. 25 years old, AAV of $3 million. If you are trying to get kind of a high-end player who can grow with the Predators through a reset, Martin Necas is a very intriguing option.
He is. I mean, he fits. He's got that scoring touch. He's young. He's a center. Like his asking price is high. It's going to be high. Like it's certainly going to be high. I mean, yes, he was making $3 million, but that was on his, his rookie contract. So
Right.
he's going to be making, going to be looking for more than that. And I think, plus, again, with him being an RFA, you do have to trade for him. You have to trade for his rights. And so the asking price is going to be even higher. And I think this one's interesting because he is definitely, on paper, again, looks like the kind of guy the Predators really need. Couple concerns.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, I have had the pleasure of knowing and watching Martin Necas through the early years of his career, as I was working in Carolina at the time that he made his NHL debut. When he's on, he is on, but he is very streaky. And I don't know, like, again, if he was maybe going to be demanding less money, then that might not concern me as much. But if you're talking about paying a guy at least like $5 million, I'd want him to be pretty consistent.
Right.
And he would just kind of disappear for stretches of games. And you just not even just not having points, like not being on the score sheet, but I feel like he just kind of disappeared on the ice too. So that's something that's maybe a little bit of a cause for concern. The other being, I just don't know if the Predators have what Carolina is going to be looking for in return for this, because I think they have part of it, but not all of it. Like, Carolina is going to want draft picks. Predators have draft picks. They're going to want high-level prospects. And I'm not saying they'll want all of this and, like they want Zach LaRue and Joachim Kemmel. Like, I'm not saying that, but I think that, they're going to want a top-level kind of prospect of that caliber, someone who's close to being NHL ready. And they need goaltending. And
yep.
Because they're in this weird spot where they have this past year was supposed to be their year, because they had all these guys, like not just Necas, but you've got, Jordan Martinook and Brett Pesce and Brady Shea and all these guys who are going to become free agents. And it's like, well, we're not going to be able to keep all of them. So like, this is our chance to do it. And, now you see they're going to want to keep that window open if they can. They're one of those teams, like, ironically, that we're saying that might try to sign Guentzel because he's a guy that could help a team that's in win now mode. But I think that, they also have to look at the future for their organization, because they have been so focused on the now that they, might need to build up their prospect pipeline a little bit more. And so that's why I'm like, I think the Predators have the pieces that Carolina could want, but I don't know that they'd be willing to part with them.
I agree with you right there. Talking about what does Carolina want in return, they're going to want either a high-end player, they're going to want top prospects. And when you are Nashville and you are in a reset right now, so many eggs are in that prospect basket. Nashville's not in win now, but when you look at some of these prospects that we have kind of coming up in the next year, 2 years, maybe 3 seasons coming in, that's when Nashville's window is really going to start opening up. And are you willing to set back that window to go all in on this? The other thing I worry about too is price. Frank Saravelli had kind of speculated that he could, an upward figure would be like 7 years, $7.5 million. That's a lot of money.
Barry Trotz is out on that, 100% out on that.
It's a lot of money, and that's a lot of term. And again, when you've got Nashville has, like, I think the 6th best prospect pool in the NHL right now. And you have so much there that you just don't want to bank on something else long-term that's going to cost you. You have to play the long game. And I agree with you. On paper, this one is very, very intriguing. But again, is Barry Trotz that close to pulling the trigger on a big piece? I don't know that he is.
I think that, again, if they could get Necas, and again, we're still in you're just negotiating, or you would just be trading for his rights right now.
Correct.
Then there's like, I mean, one thing, and this is just off the top of my head, and now this could be a whole other conversation, but it's like someone could get involved in a three-way trade for him, because that would be interesting. Maybe someone who has what Carolina wants would get Necas, and then they get the leverage by having Necas, and then they can go trade Necas for something they need. I mean, these are just fun off-season things to think about, but I think that he is he's the kind of player people will overpay for him.
Right.
Doesn't mean they should, but they will. And if he, like, again, if you're Marty Necas and a team out there is offering you 7 times 7.5, you gotta take that. Like, you gotta take that.
Right.
But that team is not going to be the Predators.
So it's going to be interesting to see what Barry Trotz is willing to spend, what Barry Trotz is willing to sacrifice this offseason to improve the Nashville Predators. Of course, we're going to keep our eye on all of the moves that he makes. All that good stuff is going to start kicking off July 1st. So buckle up, friends. It's going to be a crazy offseason, I think. Coming up on tomorrow's show, it is going to be Fun Friday, y'all. We are going to talk about what defensive player we are intrigued about in the offseason, but we're also going to tell you how we would redo some things at the combine. But before we get to that, and before we end this episode, Emma, tell everyone where they can find you and find your work.
They can find me at Emma_Lingen, and you can find my work at the Hockey News.
And you can find me on social media at AnnK_Mama on Ice. You can find my work at Penalty Box Radio. That's going to do it for today's episode of the Locked On Predators podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. We'll be back tomorrow with an all-new episode.